from the general public. Questions regarding pensions?
Thank you, Mr. President. Robert Cushman. What I want to focus on is to get an answer to this question. Are we facing a crisis now and in the near future when it comes to funding our pension plans? And based on everything I've heard from the administration, it doesn't seem like, and even from the council's perspective, that we really don't have a problem. Well, I just want to make sure that I'm dealing with the right numbers here. So if I'm wrong on any of my numbers, please correct me. But we have the police and fire one pension plan. Our actuarial accrued liabilities are about $311 million. We have $69.5 million in assets, and our unfunded liabilities are about $242 million. So our total funding ratio is 22.3%. Police 2, liabilities $162.5 million, assets of about $140.6 million, unfunded liabilities $21.9 million, 86.5% funded. Fire 2, $31.7 million in liabilities, $24.7 million in assets, $7 million unfunded liabilities, 78% funded. Our municipal plan, $122.7 million in liabilities, assets $87 million, unfunded liabilities $35.6 million, 70.9%. So I don't have any disagreement from the administration on those numbers. Oh, okay, I guess not. So when we take a look at the pension levels, what we've heard is that our plans are well funded, with the exception of police and fire one, and we're in our 18th year of a 40th year plan to fund that pension, correct? Okay. But one thing that we never hear, what effect is making the annual required contributions to all these pension plans having on the overall budget, and what effect is these future payments going to have on the overall budget? That's an important question that I think we need to ask. And let me give you the totals that I just read for all the pension plans together. Our accrued liabilities, $628.7 million. Our assets, $322 million. Our unfunded liabilities, $306.7 million. So when you look at the total funding ratio for all pension plans, we're at 51.2%. Now, there's a big argument going on with the state where, you know, we're talking about critical plans and certain things are going to kick in because of the laws. Well, to me, you can't look at just one plan and say, okay, police and fire one is a problem, and not look at the combination of everything together, because what you're going to have to do for police and fire one and all the other plans affects all the other decisions that have to be made in the budget. Now, to Councilman Marola's point, when we add in the OPEB, currently our actuarial accrued liability is $283 million, funded at zero. So when we add all these numbers together, where our actuarial accrued liabilities are $911.9 million. We have $322 million in assets. Our total unfunded liability is $589 million. If you look at the overall funding ratio with pensions and health care, it's 35.3%.
Excuse me. The OPEB number that you mentioned was $282 million. Is that total city and school?
That's city and schools.
Okay, because, and I think that's important to make too, it's city and school. Okay.
Mm-hmm. No, I think most of it is city if we broke it down.
I agree.
But my point is it's 35.3%. So let me see if I can answer the question about the effect on the budget. We are looking at the fiscal 2013 budget. We learned in these budget hearings that the employees aren't getting any raises. We're also learning that the employees are going to pay more for their health care. Yet the city's requesting over $5 million in revenue. I mean, to me, that's a crisis, in my opinion.
Well, the city's increase in the property tax levy is 3.5 million. I don't mean only, but it's 3.5. It's not 5 million, so.
But there's $5 million in new revenue going to the city side of the budget.
But.
Correct?
Well, the levy's going up $3.5 million. There's other revenues going in.
If I look at the local spending, it's going from about 119.5 million to 123.5 on the city, right?
Right. Total expenditures.
Yeah. So it's a total of
Oh, I thought you meant the taxes going up 5 million.
But my point is this, even in the mayor's budget narrative, he says the largest increase in city expenses is in the area of employee benefits. And it's becoming a constant trend if you look at past budgets, which I've been doing for the past 8 years. So if you look at the last 7 budget cycles beginning in 2007, and let's look at the total tax dollars to support our children's education, it's increased less than 0.75% annually. 4.9%. We've given 4.9% of new tax dollars, local tax dollars, to the school department. Now, if we look at the city side over that same period of time, average increase of 7.5%. A total over that same period of time is 52% increase in the local tax dollars to the city budget. I think we have a crisis.
Mr. Cushman, can I remind you we're talking about pensions?
We're talking about pensions, yes. So to dismiss the new tax dollars that are being required to fund the pensions annual required contribution, to me, it almost borderlines on incompetency to just ignore that. You can't do that. In 2004, we spent $13.7 million on taxpayer contributions to the pensions. This year, it's going to be $25.3 million, almost doubling. Now, if you look at some of the old actuarial reports when you did your pension reform, and this was based on the 8% return, in 2021, the contributions are going to triple to $39 million. 8 years later, 2028, they're going to quadruple to $52 million. We don't have a crisis?
Our actuarial reports are done every 2 years, and they alternate. And I understand what you're doing, and you took the information that was provided last year by the actuaries when we were doing our pension reform, which they've projected out for basically the life of the plan. And we all understand that, and I know you understand that too. And we all understand that there are several components to the pension system. There's the employee contribution, there's the city, or you'd probably prefer to say taxpayer contribution, and then there's the return on the investment, correct? So that any one of those 3 things going up or down obviously affects the plan in the long term. So that the reason that the city of Warwick does, and every community should, and I think you would agree with that, do new actuarial reports regularly is so that we can track the effect of those 3 components on the pension plan. So conceivably, if the economy improves and the rates of return increase, the unfunded liabilities go down and the funding ratio goes up. You would agree, correct?
Yep, big assumptions.
So is projecting something out 30 years into the future, merging that all together and saying that in 30 years, and we can't tell the future, I think we agree to that the city will be in a crisis. That's a big assumption. Now, we're doing these every 2 years. The most recent actuarial reports that you have, the public safety reports, if you speak directly, which I assume you will have opportunity to speak to our actuary when we can schedule them to come in, they will tell you that the major reason that the unfunded liability in these plans went up and the funding ratio went down is because the city adopted the new
discount rate assumptions.
Yeah, rates of return, or the new assumptions. Assumption is the term I'm looking for. That is what they will tell you. And consequently, this year, our pension contributions went up, as they did for police and fire. They went up. So I understand what you're saying, and I appreciate what you're saying, and that you're looking forward, and so are we. One of the other components to the Police Fire 1 plan is that the COLA, if we want to call it that, which I don't want to call it, is based on what active employees receive in contracts. And in working with our actuary, we've been told if we can negotiate frugal contracts, okay, that the effect of those contracts can potentially drive down our unfunded liabilities and raise our funding ratios. We're in the midst of trying to negotiate frugal contracts. And the effect of that, those contracts, have the potential to reduce those unfunded liabilities and to drive up those funding ratios. So while it's a useful tool to look forward, which you're doing, far into the future.
I'm not looking that far into the future, with all due respect.
But these plans are done every 2 years.
Yeah, I'm looking 2-3 years into the future.
You're not. You went to 20.
I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about...
I let you speak, and I'm speaking, and respectfully, these are very, complicated formulas and ratios, and I think we all understand that. But there are tools, and the projection tool is just that. It's a projection to raise issues as you're raising. So if you see someone do a 30-year projection and you see that there's going to be an issue 30 years out, it allows you the time to try to resolve those issues, correct? And that's what we're trying to do.
All right, so I don't want to get into COLAs. I think other people have questions on COLAs, but 26.6% to me, we're getting to a point where the percent of salary, I showed you my charts and graphs for the funding, where all the money's going in the budget. It's becoming unsustainable, but let me go on to another topic. I want to go on to a topic. You talked about Warwick pension reforms, and we talked about the state reforms. How much savings in this fiscal year budget is attributed to the pension reforms that were passed last year? How much savings?
No.
It's zero, right?
That's correct.
There's no savings.
Mr. Cushman, the plans aren't in effect yet. We haven't hired an employee yet.
I understand.
Okay.
So when we move,
but can I just and I'm going to go right along with what you're saying. You're projecting out 30 years. You're asking me what the savings.
I'm not.
You're asking me what.
I'm not projecting out 30 years.
Some of your statements were.
I didn't make any statement about projecting 30 years right now.
You're taking a 30-year projection and you're presenting that to us. That at some point, and I don't remember the exact date, 2025 or whatever the date is, and don't hold me to that date, that it'll be $30 million or $36 million or something like that. That's out, okay? But, one of the other things that are in these reports are payroll increases. Pay increases that I think it's in police fire one, it's either 3 or 3.75% compounded per year heading out. These reports, as I said, are done every 2 years. So those numbers 2 years from now will be different than they are today. They could be better, they could be worse. I'll grant you that, but they could be better. But we're working in police fire one, and I think you'll agree, is the critical plan. And it's defined now as a critical plan. And we are working currently to try to resolve issues in that plan.
Here's the point I want to make. When the state did its pension reforms and they dropped the rate from 8.25 to 7.5, they dropped the rate first before they did the reforms. It caused the annual required contributions to spike to unbelievable levels. They based their pension reform on what was going to take place in terms of the spiking. And they made their pension reforms, and as a result, I think Gina Raimondo said it's reduced the unfunded liabilities by $3 billion. Warwick's reduced its unfunded liabilities by $0 as a result of its pension reform last year. Is that correct?
Again,
it's a simple yes or no. Is it correct?
It's not a simple yes or no, because the plan isn't in effect yet. Their plan is. Their unfunded liability was reduced because they affected on current employees.
Yes.
Current employees. We did not. Okay? So to answer your question, the answer is no, but in the future, the answer is yes.
So by reducing the rate from 8% to 7.5%, we increased our liabilities by $82.3 million, correct?
If that's your number,
well, it's not my number. It's from the actual report. So we just talked about self-correcting mechanisms. The self-correcting mechanism means when your actuarial reports come in, your percent of salary that the taxpayers and the employees are going to be required to pay is going to go higher because you just put $82.3 million in unfunded liabilities or new liabilities into your plans, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So in the next few years, it's easy to say that the percentage or the amount of new dollars they're going to have to go to meet the annual required contributions are going to go higher, correct?
No, that's not necessarily correct.
Well, if you look at your reports over the next 2 years, it says it is correct. So let me continue with what I'm saying here, because I'm not going to get into an argument. But what you're correct on what you said the state did. The state reduced benefits for existing employees. The state proposed a hybrid plan. And we didn't do that in Warwick. So what we did by reducing the rate is we increased our liabilities, which means it's going to cost us more monies. So, you know, when we talk about reducing the rate to 7.5%, we can't really compare what the state did to what Warwick did because it's apples to oranges. But by the state's reforms, they actually save money in the current fiscal year. When we asked the school department the question, how much did pension reform save you? I think they pointed out it was hundreds of thousands of dollars in this current year budget. For this budget, there's no money, and the actuarials did compute for you what the saving was going to be over the next 5, 6, 7 years. So, you know, we've heard statements from the administration that at some point we're going to save $1 million. Those aren't my numbers. You had to go out 10 years to get $1 million savings. Now, you just told me, well, we can't go out a few years, but you could throw around $1 million in savings based on what the actuarials say, but you never do say that the increased contributions, according to that same report, are going to be $25 million. So you can't have it both ways. You can't throw out a number and say, because of our pension reforms, we saved $1 million, but then not say that the contributions are going to increase $25 million from the same exact report. You got to be consistent. So I think a reasonable person will concede that regardless of the 3 or 4 pension plans being well funded and the OPEB cost being a pay-as-you-go strategy, it's going to affect other budgeted line items. As we increase the amount of money that we're going to need for our pensions and for our health care, you're either going to have to continue to raise taxes. We're raising taxes this year. We're not giving employee raises. We're raising taxes. We're making the employees pay more for their health care. And is this going to be a trend for the future because of our pension payments going higher and higher? You know, I'm just saying, from my opinion, we're in a critical status. We have a problem in Warwick. If you're going to put blinders on, you got to be able to look out 10 and 20 years. When Providence did its pension reform, they had actuarials come in and they forecasted 5, 10, and 15 years out. You know, you're just telling me right now we can't do that, but yet you could say we're going to get a 7.5% return, which is totally ludicrous. We haven't received that return in 15 years, but we could put that on our reports, but then you're telling me we can't forecast out 5 or 10 years. You need to do that. Let me ask you another question. And this is straight from the actuarial reports. I want to read this. Quote, we feel it's important to point out that due to the amortization policy, several large gains from 6 to 10 years ago are scheduled to be fully amortized before large losses from the past 12 to 20 years. And therefore, there are 2 large increases expected to the contribution levels in 2021 and 2023. It would be prudent for the city to begin thinking through solutions on how to lessen the impact on the future budgets. Your own actuaries are telling you in the years 2021 to 2023, pension contributions are going to spike by $12 million. They're warning you. They're telling you it would be, quote, prudent to begin thinking about solutions on how to lessen the impact on future budgets, unquote. Are you thinking about that? Doesn't sound like it when you don't even want to look out 2 years.
Every day.
Well, Mr. Carullo basically made a comment 5 minutes ago that we can't look out 7 or 8 years. Your actuaries are telling you to look out. Why is the pension payment spiking by $12 million starting in the year 2021? Can someone answer that question?
That's because it's a projection. It's something that we are aware of, something that we're working on, and we work on it every single day.
Well, not according to Mr. Carullo. 7 years out's too long a time to be going out.
Hold on. That is not what I said. What I said is these are tools, and they are tools that allow us to project, which is what you're doing. You're using the tool improperly. We're using it properly. We are aware of what the costs are to the pension plan several years out. And as I said to you, and perhaps you missed it, Mr. Cushman, is we are working right now to resolve that problem. And one of the ways that our actuary, who is an expert in the field, I am not an expert, and neither are you, Mr. Cushman. He has told us if we negotiate frugal contracts that we will drive down the unfunded liability and raise the funding ratio. I think you missed that. Ernie, could you please tell me what the last quarter returns were for the city?
Last quarter.
The last quarter return from December 31st, 2011 to March 31st, 2012 was 8.48%, or an appreciation of $25,768,732.
I respect what you're saying, Mr. Cushman, but I think at this point, if you have a specific question on that line item, we'd be willing to answer it, but I don't think that we need to get into any more of a back and forth debate. I'm going to end the debate at this point.
I'm not.
And if you have any specific questions, we'd be willing to answer.
I just want to make a couple comments, because what the administration just did is a total disservice to the people out there. If you can't look at a 4-month trend. Look at 5 years, 10 years, and see what your rates of return is and what effect they've had in your pension system. All I'm asking you is something that, this is from the actuarial report. Due to an amortization policy, they're saying it's causing this spiking. What is that amortization policy that's causing this? It's your policy. You set up the policies. You tell the actuary.
Could you repeat the question?
I'm going to put the quote. Quote, we believe it's important to point out that due to the amortization policy, several large gains from 6 to 10 years ago are scheduled to be amortized before large losses from 12 to 20 years. What's the amortization policy that's causing this spiking?
Well, we have a 5-year averaging, 5-year smoothing. We amortize actuarial losses and gains. So if we have a really bad year, it's not reflected immediately, or if we have a really good year, it's not reflected immediately. It's smoothed out over time.
Okay. So why are you taking several large gains, quote, from 6 to 10 years ago? They're being fully amortized before large losses from the past 12 to 20 years. Why are you doing that? Who made that policy decision?
That's what the actuaries did when they do the smoothing. That was not a policy. It's a practice.
So it's a practice to take all your gains up front, push all your bad years down the line, so you could plant a time bomb and it explodes on somebody else's watch.
I'm not going to respond to that.
You know what? The bottom line is, I'm a business analyst. I'm a professional business analyst. I'm not an expert in pensions, but you're not an expert in pensions either. But you could easily take data, and I do it every single day. I analyze data. You don't have to be an actuarial expert to see that we have a problem in this city, when most of your tax dollars is going towards your pensions and your retiree health care costs, and it's diverting from every other line item. And you know what? I kind of sometimes feel bad for the employees. You don't realize this, but it might soon become a norm that you're not going to get as many raises and things. They're already talking about that they want to knock down the unfunded liabilities in police and fire one by not giving out raises. That means it's going to affect the people, the current employees who deserve cost of living increases. So I don't think that's a great strategy. Say, okay, we're going to save on our pension costs because we're going to screw our employees and not give them raises. There's a consequence to what you do. You know, the employees deserve good cost of living increases. They deserve raises. They deserve good health care. So the fact of the matter is you can't have it both ways. You're not going to save on your pension costs because your strategy is, we're not going to give our active employee raises. And one last thing. You never talk about cost of living increases for police 2 and fire 2. You always bring up municipal, which is a great plan. It's based on formulas, whether you can afford to give the cost of living. Isn't it true that police 2 and fire 2, tier 1, not the new tier 2, get a 3% automatic compounded COLA?
No.
Well, we have some reports here from the actuarials, and I think some of my colleagues
Mr. Cushman, listen. There are individuals who are currently in Fire 1, who when they retire have the option to take benefits from Fire 2. The vast majority, 3/4 of the retirees in Fire 1, their increases in their pension are based on what the active employees.
I didn't ask that question. Police 2 and fire 2.
Police 2
What's the COLA?
No, you said police and fire 1, Mr. Cushman.
I said police 2 and fire 2.
You did not.
All right, well, I'm asking you, police 2 and fire 2, what's the COLA?
3%.
3% compounded, right?
3%.
All right.
That's right.
So you know what? I'm just saying, when you disclose this stuff, do everybody a favor and talk. We have individual plans, and be honest with everybody.
I think if you ask the firefighters that are here tonight, they are fully aware of how their plan works. They worked along putting that plan together. We've met with their executive board. We've had these discussions with them. We are working with them. They are trying to work with us to resolve these issues. You're not aware of that, nor should you be aware of that, Mr. Cushman. But I'm telling you right now, and you can't have it both ways either. You can't come here and say, we're screwing our employees, because we're not screwing our employees. They're sitting right here. We're negotiating with our employees, Mr. Cushman, and they have the option whether they approve a contract that benefits them or they do not approve a contract that benefits them, Mr. Cushman. You'll come in here, if we were giving them raises, you would say you shouldn't give them raises.
Never said that.
You would say that. You have said that.
No.
Now, if you're going to tell me I can't have it both ways, I'm telling you, you can't have it both ways.
You know what?
Okay? We all agree that there's a problem with the pension system. We agree. We are working to resolve it. You might not like the way we're resolving it, but I don't hear any solutions from you either, Mr. Cushman.
You know what?
I think, let me finish. I think what your goal is.
Talk longer than I have.
For once. I think what your goal is to try to force the elimination of pensions for city employees, police, and fire. I think that is your goal. I may be wrong.
My goal. Don't stop putting speculations and words in my mouth.
You stand there and you, Mr. Cushman, you stand there every council meeting and
so,
you
know, why don't you stop grandstanding for a second? And first of all, I've never said about employees not getting raises. You know? I'm concerned about this from multiple perspectives. From the perspective of the employees, from the perspective of the city taxpayers. And I just have a problem when the administration doesn't even think that we have a problem. That's my issue. You know what? I hope Councilman Solomon, I give Councilman Solomon a lot of credit for coming out with his releases about the financial status of the city, where the assets are declining. Mayor Avadishan came out with a statement and said, well, other than OPEB and other than our pension required contributions over 30 years, our city assets would be increasing. You know, that's like saying, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to sit down. Hey, listen, if you want to just talk about analyzing data and taking a look at and realizing what the problem is, I'll be happy to share my results with you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Roger Duran. We've been talking about pensions here tonight.
but you addressed the OPEB issue, which never gets discussed, and I know we're not going to discuss that now. We're discussing pensions, but that's another issue. Mr. Cushman, you're a man ahead of your time, and I feel so. I really feel sorry for you. But I'm sorry. Let's get back to pensions. Here's my problem. Mark, you did a good job describing some of this tonight. But here's my problem. We talk about we're going to look long-term, then we're going to look short-term. We're now going to look long-term, short-term. Ernie gives us the rate of return for the last 3 months. Ernie, anyone who's been following the stock market knows the S&P since April 1st has dropped 7%, over 7%. So I bet you're just about break even now. But one of the things I've listened to up at the State House as well as here, you have to look long-term. You're even talking tonight about smoothing and everything else, Mark. And then we get quoted a 3-month return? Come on, let's be real. I also agreed with you on this point. We can't project 15 years out. Who knows what the rate of return is going to be? I think your point is very valid. But let me tell you what my concern is. Let's get back to the real world here. I have a copy, and Oscar sent me this under Freedom of Information back about 2 months ago, the real rate of returns for the plans since October 1st, 1997. Yeah, but it's 15 years. That's what we're talking about. They're making a projection right now on your pension plans at 7.5%. You've got in the last 15 years. Let's talk real world. We're not talking short term. The actuarials will come in here and say you have to look long term. Your 15-year return, not one plan got over 6%. That's a fact. So I'm not projecting into the future. I'm looking at what fiduciary trust told us. For the last 15 years, you haven't gotten over 6% on any plan. You've averaged 5.3. And yet they're sitting here today telling you 7.5%. That's the question, guys. Somebody's got to make up this difference. And 20 years from now, when this plan isn't funded, you guys are going to do it on retirement.
Roger, will you please address the council?
I'm sorry. So anyhow, the fact of the matter is, and as I said, I'm going to make this very brief. We haven't been getting this rate of return. We keep on talking, not only here, the state of Rhode Island, the same thing. Ernie and I have been through this every year. I get up and say. 2 years ago, we talked about the 8% return, and I told him it's ridiculous. Unfortunately, I was right. And it was a very interesting article in the New York Times this weekend. I don't know if anybody saw it, about municipal pensions. The question was this then. Let's have a question. If you want a question, I'll give it to you. Mayor Bloomberg made a statement, and he said, if anyone can promise you a 7% return today, be suspect and make sure his name isn't Bernie Madoff. That's the mayor of New York, who knows a little bit about finances. That was his quote. Warren Buffett said in 1999 that the state of California should be looking under their CalPERS plan, not a return over 5.5%. And unfortunately, he was right. And now the workers are paying the price. So the reality of the situation is, and I'm going to wrap it up here because I see the council president checking his watch. What we're going to do is here, I think your rate of return is unrealistic at 7.5%. I really do. I think you should be looking at probably in a 6% range, because you're going to owe the employees a couple years from now an explanation as to why we haven't made the pension returns and why their pensions aren't going, the obligations are going to have to be cut. Thank you.